You are listening to the Manument Podcast. My name is Casey, and I'm here with my buddy Glenn Johnson, investment advisor and founder of Jabez Financial right here in the Uncasville area. All right, Glenn, I want to dive in today, and I want to start the show off with a little bit of a giggle because I've got a clip from comedian Will Burkhart, and he's talking a little bit about the useless things that we learned in high school that do not apply to us today, and I think we can actually relate this to retirement. So let's take a listen.
Remember that? They were like, here's trigonometry. What? Here's chemistry. Why? The recorder. Yeah, remember that year? We all played the recorder and then just never talked about it again? Why? Why did we do that? It doesn't even sound good. Whoa, 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 whoa. Balloon that stupid thing for a year. It's nice the first time we're talking about it. You've never heard anybody be like, hey, you remember that kid Steve from high school? You know what he's doing now? Professional recorderist. Yeah. Nah, he's stuck with it. Yeah. He's playing hot cross buns at Carnegie Hall next week.
I definitely did my stint in elementary school with the recorder, Glenn. But one thing a lot of high schools don't teach is basic financial skills. So I'm wondering if you can talk to us about how you work with clients who are maybe a little embarrassed to ask the simple questions because they think it's something they should already know. Is this something that you come across with your clients?
Well, regularly. Yeah. And unfortunately, high schools don't provide the kind of financial education needed for economic success. In fact, it's rarely even taught in colleges as well, because the educational system itself was modeled after the Prussian system, originally created to develop obedient workers. It was really successful during the Industrial Revolution. And America thrived because we had more highly educated, skilled workers. But nowhere was the ultimate benefit ever really intended to be for the student. Therefore there's no real need for a proper financial education to be included in the curriculum now. It's still designed to keep people working and keep them paying taxes.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's an important point for our listeners. This isn't really, though, about blaming the system. It's about recognizing the gap, I think. And that's where a lot of people start feeling that embarrassment, right?
Yeah, because the system worked exactly the way it was intended to. It was intended to educate people so that they could go work for somebody else. It wasn't created so that people could develop financial independence and financial freedom. Mm-hmm. In fact, our whole economic system, or the forming of our country, rather, now that was created on the basis of free enterprise, meaning when the settlers first came here, there weren't any jobs. No one was hiring. People had to go into business for themselves and develop the spirit of the entrepreneur. You'd have one person that learned how to build little houses, another person would farm, another person would be a blacksmith, and they would trade, and there would be economic exchanges of things of value between people. But people stood on their own 2 feet and they created something and they built something. But with the advancements of technology, it became easier for people to go get a job and thus formed monster companies. And obviously hundreds of years later, we go through the Industrial Revolution, and that's when they needed more educated, skilled workers. So in the process, sometimes we got away from that entrepreneurial spirit of creating freedom. And that requires a different type of financial education. So getting that financial education that's actually going to set you free, the responsibility has been and always will be on you. And when we realize that it's our responsibility to obtain our own financial education that'll set us free, we'll start looking in different places.
Okay.
Recognizing that we're all ignorant on a different set of subjects. That's why I don't pretend to be any smarter than any of my clients. We're all experts in our own fields, but we know different things. So where my clients rely on me, they rely on me to create an exceptional financial system that will simplify and streamline their finances, creating the financial security they're really looking for.
Well, and I love that you say that you don't pretend to be smarter than any of your clients. We're all experts on different things. But I think a lot of people are probably worried to come into a financial advisor's office because they think they might sound foolish. But I think it's so important to remember that you're not there to test them. You are there to teach them. And I think that's something that people maybe miss or forget about when it actually comes time to take the step to start working with a financial advisor. It's not a test. You're there to learn.
That's right. And that's why actually Sesame Street got a lot of things right. Well, back in the day.
Okay, let's back it up to Sesame Street. I like it.
That's right. In fact, I just saw the other day this thing come through my news feed of something out of the late 70s of Sesame Street counting from 1 to 12. And, well, you may not recognize the jingle, but I do. And I just thought, well, that it's still stuck with me. And when you come into my office for the first time, I don't expect anybody to be a financial expert. No, that's my job. So what I have is what I like to call a Sesame Street version of explaining how things work. And I love to see the light come on in people's eyes when they begin to really understand how the financial system works. And as we go through it, making the right financial decisions become obvious. Confidence skyrockets and financial worries evaporate. Nelson Mandela, actually, I have his quote on one of the back of my Manument United brochures is, he said, education is the most powerful weapon you can use to change the world. And, sometimes we have to think, well, is the education we've received, has that been used for our benefit or against us? And when we have a conversation face to face, we're able to explain things in such a way that it makes sense. And understanding the big picture was really what people need. And at the point of recognizing the best financial options, it becomes easy. And making smart financial decisions becomes effortless.
When people face this fear that they have to take that next step and meet with a financial advisor, they do come to your office. They sit down, they have that face-to-face conversation that you were talking about with you. And you're able to kind of give them the Sesame Street version. And you see that light bulb maybe finally go off. What's the number one thing that you hear from people after they have that light bulb moment and you're able to explain it to them in terms that make sense? Is it a new sense of confidence that they find? What's the number one thing that you're hearing from clients once that light bulb goes off after they meet with you?
Well, first, I love the expression on their face and their shoulders drop and they're like, that makes perfect sense. It's like all of these things, it's like they've been walking around in a maze and all of a sudden the blinders come off and like, oh, that's why things are like this. And when you have that kind of feeling settled, of understanding, it just brings with it a bunch of peace because now you're not in like mental chaos, I guess.
Yeah.
It's very settling. And then when we realize how it's really not that complicated, people can all of a sudden, well, of course I should be doing this.
Yeah.
And the correct decisions become, like I said, really obvious.
So if someone's listening and they've been holding back taking this next step to meet with an advisor out of embarrassment, thinking they don't know enough, what's the downside of waiting? What should they be kind of more in fear of than the embarrassment? What should they be fearful of if they wait to take that next step?
Well, here's the thing.
Not to scare everyone, but there are consequences.
There are. And the funny thing is that people are more motivated by the fear of loss than the desire for gain. Unfortunately, because of that natural way of people operate, people will use fear as a tactic to persuade people to make one decision over another. That is not my objective at all whatsoever. But think about it. People will work harder to keep their car from being repossessed than they will to work overtime so they can have a nicer car. Because when times get tough, the car we're driving right now is just fine.
Yeah.
Right? So that's why a lot of times people will use scare tactics to try to motivate people. My objective is really just to keep people informed. And when people are accurately informed, yes, well, sometimes there is a sense of urgency. And I feel a responsibility to point that out now that we're at that crossroads now, not to instill fear, but just to shine a light on what's going on. And not taking action is taking action. It's just allowing life to happen rather than predetermining a desired outcome and then saying, okay, this is what I need to do to make sure that I'm living out the rest of my life the way I want to and not just the way I have to. We're really making it simple. All you've got to do is pick up the phone and give us a call at 860-288-5800. 888-9977 and say, you know what? I'd like to come in and have a conversation and get a chance to meet Glenn and sit down and say hi. And that opens the door. And we can have a conversation, and I can say with absolute certainty, by the time you leave, you'll be feeling a whole lot better and far more encouraged about what's to come.
Glenn, my friend, as always, thank you for breaking it down for us today. You and I are going to be back next week with more retirement insight. But until then, I'm going to hand it back over to you to take us out today.
Okay. You've worked hard year after year, decade after decade, and you owe it to your future self not to squander all the effort that you've put in. You owe it to your future self to make smart decisions now so that you can enjoy every moment the rest of your life.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Manument Podcast. Make sure you subscribe wherever you get your favorite podcasts so that you never miss an episode, and we will see you next time. Take care.
Investment advisory services offered through Jabez Financial, LLC, a registered investment advisor firm. Registration is not an endorsement by securities regulators. By contacting us, you may be provided with information about insurance products, including annuities, offered through Glenn Johnson, Connecticut Insurance, license number 4628409. The firms are separate entities. Annuity guarantees rely on the financial strength and claims-paying ability of the issuing insurance company and are not offered by Jabez Financial, LLC. Read your contract for restrictions, limitations, or penalties. Jabez Financial, LLC is not licensed in all 50 states. To find out if Jabez Financial, LLC is licensed in your state, please call 860-390-0093.